Hi, Misha here. And last time I did a video on America's NASA space capsules, Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo. And now it's time to look at the Space Shuttle. For that first video, I used 124 or 125 scale, depending on which website you read, models from Darren. And for this one, I'm using a 1/200 scale model from Hobby Master. This is a relatively new model. This is die cast. Majority of the shuttle is metal, including the wings, the cargo bay doors, the main body, and even the tail. Of course, the engine cones and the windows are polymer plastic. And as with pretty much all the Hobby Master models, you can have the landing gear up or down, and so on and so forth. Much like with the space capsule, this is going to be more of an overview video, because to even really break into the tech specs of the shuttle, not to mention the launch system, would take hours. A total of 6 shuttles were built. Enterprise was actually not space-worthy. It was built without engines and other critical features. It was a glide test, although originally they were planning to retrofit Enterprise after to make it a fully functional shuttle. It was designated OV-101, and it was first rolled out to sea in September of 1976, and then went through a series of glide tests, a total of 5, ending in late summer of 77, and it was retired after its testing phase in October of that year. The first fully functional shuttle was Columbia. She was first launched in April of 1981, designated as OV-102. Next was Challenger. Now, interestingly, Challenger was designated OV-099. She was launched in '83, and it was actually another test frame that they used to make Challenger. They decided it was actually more expensive to retrofit Enterprise than it was just to take one of the existing test frames and turn it into Challenger. So originally Challenger was not meant to be space-worthy, but ended up being so. So that became OV-099, which is interesting that it has an earlier number. These were followed by Discovery, OV-104, and then Atlantis, OV-105, this is Atlantis here. This was the last of the original space shuttles. Of course, in '86, we had the Challenger disaster, which was on its 10th flight. That stalled the program for 2 years, but then Discovery was launched into space in 1988, and things came back on course. And to replace Challenger, Endeavour was constructed using mostly spare parts, second parts, and it was first flown in 1992 as OV-106. So Endeavour was the last of the shuttles, thus in many ways it was the most modern. However, since it was built with some spare parts, and some of its parts were older than the ones seen in Atlantis. So in some ways Endeavour was more advanced than Atlantis, and in some ways Atlantis was a little more advanced than Endeavour, mostly to do with weight. All shuttles were very similar. It was 122 feet long, just under 60 feet tall, and had a wingspan of a little under 80 feet. So quite a large vehicle, at least compared to older spacecraft. If you remember from the first video, Apollo had a habitable space of about 218 cubic feet. Well, the space shuttle really ramped that up to over 2,600 cubic feet. But it would have a crew of anywhere from 2 when it was just being tested, up to 8, although I believe it never had more than 7. Either way, you had double the crew of Apollo. It had 3 decks. The uppermost deck was basically the control area. Then the middle deck was the living area, working area. Everything was there from the sleeping nooks to the galley, if you could call that such. The airlock was there. And then the third deck was really just for utilities, supplies, machinery, that kind of thing. So 2 real habitable decks. Yeah. And I know 2,600, actually it was like 26, 25 cubic feet sounds like a lot, but it really wasn't for that many people. But then again, in space, space is more maximized. So there's that. It was, of course, shot into space with 2 solid propellant rocket boosters and a large fuel tank. It also used its 3 engines in the back to help thrusting into space, and then of course for maneuvering and all that in space as well. Discovery would end up being the most used of the shuttles, with 39 missions to its credit. Atlantis here came next with 33 to its credit, and actually was the final shuttle to fly in 2011. Endeavour, because she came later, was used 25 times. She and Discovery were retired in 2011, shortly before Atlantis. Actually, Endeavour was supposed to be the final mission, but then they had one more activity they needed to get done, so Atlantis was brought out. Of course, as I said, Challenger, Tragedy, 86, 10 missions, and the Columbia tragedy in 2003 was on its 28th mission. And Enterprise, while she never flew in space, was used for 5 glide test missions. Basically meaning they drug her up into the sky on a 747 and dropped her to see what happened. Well, obviously she survived. Most landings, because this would land like a regular glider, were done during the day, but about 26, if memory serves, were actually done at night, so this was capable of night landing. It was a reusable vehicle. Of course, it had to be extensively refurbished before this could happen. It had tiles on the bottom that acted as heat shield, these black tiles. A very complex, a very impressive, and also a very expensive machine. So let's get a little closer and take a look inside. Alright, got it opened up. The Hobby Master doors are actually quite neat. They're kind of spring-loaded. They're not just simple hinge. They have positions. I thought that was kind of neat. In addition to transporting up to 8 humans into space, the shuttle was, well, a shuttle. It had a cargo bay, which was one of its main features. It was 60 feet long, 15 feet wide, and it could carry a maximum load of 53,000 pounds. Although in practice, the heaviest load it was ever sent up with was just over 50,000 pounds. That was in 1999 with the Chandra Observatory. And that would also be relatively low Earth orbit. If you wanted to get into high-low Earth orbit, such as the International Space Station, it could transport about 27,000 pounds. So, of course, the higher orbit it went, the less it could take with, which is only logical. It could also bring back cargo up to 35,000 pounds. And of course it could house a lot of modules and be configured. When the cargo bay doors are open, you should be able to see on the model that they're kind of silvery. They acted as solar panels, giving supplemental energy to the shuttle. This model does come with the arm, the canned arm. It is articulated. It can rotate. It has 3 points of articulation. This was used for all kinds of tasks. It's very iconic to the space shuttle. It also has the Spacelab module inside. On the model, this is removable. So if you don't want to display it with the Spacelab in, you don't have to. The original Spacelab was designed by the European Space Agency. Work began in 1974, and they would deliver 2 modules, LM1 and LM2, and it can be configured a number of different ways. This is the full module. It has both pressurized and unpressurized sections, but it could also just be put up with pallets, which are part of it. So there are different ways of setting up Spacelab here. It gave an extra working environment for research and really showed a lot of international cooperation, and really was kind of a predecessor to the International Space Station. Like I said, it was removable if not needed. Spacelab is in full configuration would be used on 23 shuttle missions, ranging from 83 to 98, and then it would be in limited use components of it up through 2008. A total of 32 missions would use some part of Spacelab. Sorry, Spacelab. Spacelab. Yep. Skylab was the older station. Atlantis would fly with the full module, the full lab, in June of 95. So this would be the closest configuration to what we see here. Although looking at the list, Atlantis flew probably less frequently with Spacelab than Columbia or Discovery. But it's a neat component to have, and again, if you don't want it in the model, it just pegs in with 2 large pegs. You can just pull that out of the cargo bay. You can also pull the arm off if you don't want it. But I like having my bay loaded up. These components, of course, are plastic, polymer. But again, the doors and stuff are metal on this model. So yeah, this was America's space vehicle from 1981 until retirement in 2011. All shuttles, all told, flew 135 missions. That over a 30-year period. So it did more than 4 missions per year on average, close to 5 if you consider that there was this break between 86 and 88 because of Discovery. There was also another break after the Columbia disaster in 2003. So if you factor in those intentional pauses, it was about 5 missions a year, all told. There is so much to say about this machine. It was extremely complicated, as I said earlier. So I will do a separate video on my thoughts about the Space Shuttle program. Was it worth it? And also my thoughts on Challenger and Columbia, because I was around both times when those happened live. So I have thoughts there. But this video is long enough. I'll just wrap up by saying the Hobby Master model here is a nice Space Shuttle model. It's not amazing, because there are so many Space Shuttle models out there. But it's definitely quite detailed considering the 1/200 scale. I think I would have preferred it in 1/44, but yeah, cost and everything else would have gone up too. I do like that it's die-cast, being made of primarily metal. Gives it some nice weight and heft. I think it would be neat if they would introduce a 747 for this to be piggybacked on as kind of an upgrade or accessory, and also the booster and fuel tank set to plug it into if you'd like to have it in a launch configuration. Just a thought. I mean, they could make all new models, of course, but if people that already own the shuttle, why make them pay twice? But then again, when have model companies ever been too concerned about making people pay twice? For the money, these are under $100 new. It's not bad. It really isn't. I was more excited to get Gemini because you just don't see many Gemini models, but I knew I had to have a space shuttle in the collection, so I picked this one as a good balance between price, and I needed one that was, of course, pre-made, and I really liked that this one was metal, and there aren't many pre-made metal options out there. The only other pre-made, pre-painted ones tend to be those mahogany carved ones, which aren't bad, but they like detail. Of course, they usually don't move. And I like that this one had the working cargo bay and also working landing gear. So yeah, that's where I went with it, and I'm not disappointed. These just recently came out about a year ago. They do Atlantis here, they do Discovery, and they do Endeavor. So the surviving shuttles. I think it would be neat if they would do Enterprise, and maybe even Challenger and Columbia, if they, do them with the respect they deserve. And I'm sure they would. But yeah, I talked about capsules, and I only thought it was fair to talk about the shuttle. Again, this video is just on the shuttle itself. I'll talk about the launch system in a different video, and probably individual components and thoughts as time goes by. Well, any questions or comments, as always, welcome them below. And if you could, like, share, and subscribe. This is Misha, and I'll catch you very soon next time. Oh, I forgot to mention one more space shuttle. OV-100 Moonraker. Silly me. Catch you next time.